Well, welcome to all of you who have joined us here at the Brainstorming the Human Connection. I think we're still brainstorming. Well, I hope we'll have a lively discussion today because it has to do with you, all of yous, as they say in Brooklyn. This has been a very interesting time. I suppose everyone says that whatever time they're in, but it's been different. There have been curveballs thrown at us. There have been new. Not only do we had the pandemic that we've been dealing with, but we've had new versions of it. We've had changes where it looks like we can not use a mask, or the number of people who are dying from it has gone down, so you don't have like freezer trucks as morgues or anything like that. We seem to have passed that stage, but it seems also to have lulled us into a state where we think, well, it's not a thing anymore. And there are a lot of people who are, especially people who are immune compromised or old or whatever, weak, and they're getting long-term COVID symptoms. We've also had some interesting, to put it mildly, political upheavals. We've had an increase, apparently, in the number of mass shootings. And these kind of things can destabilize us. And it has been destabilizing for a number of people. And I'm going to guess that all of us, to some extent, have experienced that destabilization, even if we've managed to find ways to cope. And so, with every kind of tragedy and trauma and upheaval, the corollary, or the other side to that, are opportunities. There are opportunities to rethink or even think for the first time about our life mission statement. What's the point of all of this anyway? What am I doing? What do I want to do? What is this life all about? The kind of questions that we tend to avoid because they remind us of our mortality, and we kind of like to not think about that much. Apparently, it's a deep, dark abyss that we would like not to think about, but hey, it's not going away. So the thing is, it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, in this time that I have, without dwelling on what we lack and what we don't have, in this time that I have, what can I do with it? What would be my purpose? What would give me the most pleasure and make me feel the most worthwhile? Or what is it that I want to do? It gives us an opportunity to think about those kinds of things. And so I want to engage all of us who care to join us today with that question, or those kinds of questions. What is it that we want to do? But I'd like to start off by just doing a check-in. How has the past year or so treated you? How have you been feeling? Very open question. So I'll leave that open to anyone who wants to join in and share that with us. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah. I think part of it for me has been like kind of like a fatigue. And I only say that because, you know, particularly with, I mean, everything is kind of measured by the pandemic now. I mean, there's kind of a before, during, and I don't know if this is really after, but it's kind of after that first real kind of blast of it, where we were in lockdowns, where we are, I mean, there was a lot more isolation physically. And during that time, it was, I wouldn't say it was invigorating by any means, but just like something fearful, a lot of times, you kind of rise to it. You kind of get adrenaline, you're dealing with new situations, you're trying to figure out. And, we've kind of moved past that stage, but not, like you said, not really past, the greater sense of it. And it's a bit fatiguing. And I think part of that is, like you said, there's a lot of other things going on, but that still nags there. So, upheavals and geopolitical situations and economic, and then you still kind of have this health thing. And I mean, it's hard to find a spot where you kind of feel like, okay, that feels completely, kind of safe or normal. Not that there aren't moments like that, but they seem much more fleeting. And it gets tiring. For me, it's hard to just kind of bury myself into something, because there's always something like seeming like coming along that's big. It's not little things necessarily. There doesn't seem a lot of, I can't dive down and be petty about something and have kind of a petty rant. I mean, I can, but it gets washed away almost right away by something that's actually kind of feels almost like an existential kind of challenge or threat or something like that. And I maybe that's just kind of, kind of a sense of, I wouldn't say a sense of well-being, but it's a sense of normalcy to kind of have that space where you can complain about something that, isn't going to be like threatening your tomorrow. And so it just kind of wears you down a little, I think, at least for me.
Yeah, I feel you. Anyone else? How's the world been treating you in the last year or so?
I think I like Todd's word. It's exhausting. It's just been really exhausting last couple of years. And I could add one word just to keep it simple: confusing. I think too, it's been exhausting and confusing. And like I said, there's just so much different things going on. And then there's this pandemic on top of it. And when do we get to the endemic part? And what do we do? What do we do to keep ourselves safe and to keep those around us safe? And it's just exhausting to live your life and then have this constant thing hanging over you as well. And I won't get into the politics side
of it. Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. But I think it plays into how we're feeling. And as much as we don't like to talk about it, I'm not sure that not talking about it is half of the problem, because we don't engage with it because we seem to lack the emotional stamina or we just don't have the practice. We don't have a way to say, okay, this is somebody's political opinion, but that's not the person. That is, well, maybe it's not them. Sometimes you think it is, Betty, you were going to say something eloquent.
Yeah, right. Confusing is a very good word. I feel like there's been probably more upheaval in my life than I even recognize. It's started coming more clear to me now, but that doesn't make me any more clear about how I'm going to or how I am dealing with it. I'm far along in my presumed lifespan, and so I guess that makes me want to make the most of my time even more so. I've always had calamity in my life until I retired and took up living by myself. So there's a lot of discombobulation. You know, what am I doing? And I try to balance this feeling of being too selfish with my time and my energy, and zeroing in on the things that I think are mostly what I want to do, creatively speaking, against the fact that I have had it so easy compared to the rest of the world in this last 2 or 3 years. No worry about a roof over my head, except when there's a tornado in the neighborhood. You know, I always have a means, for almost the first time in my life, that I know I have food in the cupboard and I can pay for my electricity and things like that. So there's a lot of sorting out, which requires time. I require a lot of rest. And yet I recently tasted the good times of being with friends again in person. And then as soon as something like that happens, and then I get another bad report. Just this morning, a musical artist in my neighborhood whom I know and love has been struck with COVID. She's just come off of a big musical thing of her career. My cousin, not cousin, that we had here one time, Andrew Sheldon, reported being extremely ill with a variety of COVID type things that are being laid not at the feet of the variety that we are all familiar with, but something that they are not quite sure about yet. And so it's not over. So I'm just confused and a little unsettled, but I'm doing all right, I think. You know, I have friends I can speak to and listen to, and plenty of worthwhile things right here within arm's reach in the form of books and music and paints and birds and things like that.
Thank you, Betty. Jennifer, you are raising your hand. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I would just want to share that over the past year or the time of the pandemic, that as more and more things sort of pile on top of each other, I just have this feeling of helplessness that, you know, I feel like in our country, our democracy is threatened and our Congress is deadlocked and our Supreme Court is now politicized in a way that it normally hasn't been. And the pandemic is, you know, people get sick and people still die from the disease, and it's just one thing after the other, and it makes me want to sort of retreat into, instead of trying to think how I can help solve these big problems, it just kind of makes me want to hibernate in my own home and community and not undertake the effort to try to make large changes because it feels so overwhelming.
Very interesting. What have you been doing to cope with that, Jennifer?
Oh, you know, I spend more time with people that I agree with, I guess, on some of these concerns. And I know that that's not the healthiest way to engage with others and try to have meaningful discussions, but it just feels safer.
Very interesting. Thank you for that contribution to our discussion. Anyone else can talk about what you've been experiencing? What kind of challenges have you been experiencing in this last year or so? Kevin?
I had a discussion on social media with a friend. His name is Chuck Rosh, and he's from up around Northeast South Dakota, and he's been in DC as a reporter for his whole career, about whether this is a tougher time than 1968 and those years. And my thought is, I'm more frightened of for the future now than I was then. Maybe I was younger then and didn't know as much, but because we've had a destruction of the meaning of truth and fact that I don't think we had then. We've had a disintegration of any sort of a political system that cooperates and works that I think we didn't have then. Certainly we had terrible things. We had riots, and we hadn't come very far even yet in race relations. We still have a long way to go. We had kids dying, hundreds of kids a week dying in Vietnam. And that was horrible, but we didn't have shootings in the street. We didn't have shootings in the schools. We didn't have the kind of things that we're dealing with now. And when I come back to it, the thing that scares me most is we could agree then on some fundamental principles. We might diverge on specifics, and we could come together on facts. And we're to the point now where we have an entire segment of our population, maybe a third in the United States. And if you tie that to the rabid Trump base, you know, I don't want to be divisive here politically, but I think this was set up by AM radio and some certain commentators. And I think it reached the point where the people, as my friend Chuck Woodard said once in a recent conversation, I knew those people were out there. I always knew they were out there. I just didn't know there were so many of them. And so we're got a movement back towards divided race, towards white supremacy that's larger, I think larger than it was in 1968, and has more footing than it did in 1968. All of that, you know, apart from COVID and apart from isolation and those things, I'm more frightened for the future of this country than I've ever been in my life, and I'm 70 years old.
Interesting. Thank you. Anyone else? What have you been feeling? Todd?
I just want to say something really interesting there that Kevin brought up. I was watching this old television thing with Simon and Garfunkel, and they were talking to each other. And they were talking about, you know, birthdays coming up. And one was talking about Beethoven. The other one was talking about the bicentennial. And he goes, oh, you know, country's going to turn 200. And Garfunkel said, do you think we're going to make it? That feeling is the feeling. That's the feeling. That's the feeling. That's the unsettling part on the political side. I think there's just it's that unsettledness. It seems universal. Even people, and this is everybody. It's even the people who would be what you would consider maybe the rabid base. There's a lot of unsettledness as far as the future. And I know that part of that is that our past is shifting so rapidly. You know, our recent past is like unlike anything else we've ever seen. Things have changed so rapidly that when we try to look forward, you don't want to. I mean, and I'm not saying that you don't do it, you know, try to, but you don't want to. There's a time when you just always said, okay, I'm going to shoot forward and think like that. But it's tough when you look right behind you and it's just like, it feels like the floor is falling out behind you and you're running forward into the dark sort of thing. It's like, I don't know what's there. And that feeling, I feel like that's been held before, but I probably agree with Kevin, but I don't know because I was 2 years old in 1968. So I can't say really how I felt then.
Yeah. Well, this is a very interesting point that both of you are making. In fact, 2 or 3 people have made about the abyss, you know, not knowing what there is. And I think we have to couple that with we are creatures of habit. That's why we're always looking for a forecast. What's going to happen tomorrow so I can be prepared for it, because that allows our stress to be lessened because we at least think we know, even if finally that's not the thing. The idea that we can imagine forward where we're going gives us a certain amount of confidence, and therefore our stress level is down. But as soon as we think, no, that's an abyss, we have no idea. You know, we would rather lie and something that is demonstrably false than unknown. That's kind of a human condition. And so these times when it is unknown can really give us a sense of panic, you know, like what the heck, you know. So I'd like to, is there anyone else who would like to contribute to this conversation about what you've been feeling.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think as a retired person, my world has become smaller, but I also have become a kinder, gentler person, and been more aware of listening to other people, where in the past I might have dismissed some of those opinions. And so as a result of that, I like myself better, that I am kinder and gentler. It's not my human nature to be that way, because I do like to be contrary, but that's the society right now that's not a good way to be. And to especially listen within my family, because we are diverse in our opinions, and arguing about them isn't going to produce anything, but rather to be very aware that we have strong opinions that we're not going to be in agreement with.
Well, just as an kind of an aside, Carolyn, since you mentioned having different opinions, and I think that can give us a certain sense of frustration. How do you address that with people that you love? You know, like you see that they have differing opinions. You want to understand them. Do you have a way that you speak with them or draw them out to understand what they are thinking? You know, I mean, not you understand. I mean, that's one thing. You understand what they're thinking, but them understanding what they're thinking. At least that's my dilemma often, is that people have opinions that are based in nothing beside the chili they ate the day before that had been in the refrigerator too long, you know, and then suddenly they have some kind of wild dream, and then they think that's reality. I mean, it seems like that. So you try to say, well, what is it? What is that about? Have you had, you know, and they often, they may know, but they don't have the vocabulary to express it. They don't have the syntax. They don't have the sentence structure in their mind to make the case for their opinion. Have you experienced such a thing? And if you have you found a way that you address that?
I don't have that skill set, even though my training would say that I do. So within my family, I guess the common ground is to find things that we have agree on and of interest. And my grandkids and I would be more in agreement on most issues, and they have tried to influence their parents with very little success. So again, the common ground, and when we gather as a family, those are not things we're discussing, but rather we're enjoying each other on things that we can agree on. So my bottom line always is that I want to have a relationship with my kids rather than being at odds with them. So if you want to say I'm being a chicken about it, you're correct.
Well, one of the things that I've observed, because many people take that approach, and one of the things I've observed is that people who are, let's say, not as accommodating to others, they don't have any problems just saying, well, I'm sticking here. And they don't have any problem bringing up, quote, divisive topics. They only say that when people say, well, maybe that's not fair to everybody. Well, don't be divisive. I find that that's a ratchet effect that brings people to where we are from where we were trying, I thought we were trying to go, where we are trying to see how others feel and how we can help them, how can we accommodate their needs, their reality, without it destroying others. It seems like people who want to be open about that, they give in very easily, where the people who want to be very stiff and just say it's my way or the highway, they're very vocal, very loud. You see their posters and flags and everything all the time. But every time someone who says, you know, I think we could be kinder or gentle, don't be divisive. You know, that seems like a losing hand in the losing game to me.
Can I just add something to that?
Sure.
I have and I want to make it clear that I think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the extremists in both parties, have way too much control over the parties and have recently. But I don't think it's 50-50 right now. I think when the Republican Party has completely, a large percentage of members have completely gone away from fact, completely gone into fictional accounts of things that never happened and have been proven to never happen, then I think it's balanced. It's way out of balance in that direction. I spoke to a Republican office holder that I've known for a long time and respect, and he's very thoughtful, and he's old school Republican. You know, he believes in, you know, of responsible government and limited government and economic, controls and low taxes. And I would always ask him, are we going to come out of this? And he would always say, sure, you know, we're fine, we'll be okay. And I asked him the other day, first of all, about the party. Is the Republican Party going to recover from this? And he said, I honestly don't know. I said, is our nation going to recover from this? He said, I honestly don't know. And this is somebody that never in my life has ever told me that. And again, I'm getting back to what you said about keeping quiet. I shut up for my recent family reunion. In fact, I wrote a whole blog about it on public broadcasting because I want to get along with a guy, my brother-in-law, and some other members of my extended family that I love, but fight with and have fought with. And we used to fight over Nixon, we'd fight over government, we'd fight, and then we'd go have lunch and everything would be fine. Now, we had a fight 10 years ago and we didn't speak to each other for 5 years hardly. And it's different now. And so I just shut up. I just didn't talk politics with him. I talked hunting, fishing, sports, growing up. And I think that's sad, but I think you're right that a lot of times other people, we tap dance around them and they're ready to go all the time. Okay. And they say things that we have to absorb and just say, okay, I'm not going to fight on that. So then I ask myself, should I fight? Should we not fight it at every turn, even with people we love? Are we giving in and losing our country person by person by not fighting?
That is a difficult and tough dilemma. And we want to have peace. We want to have, at least when we disagree, we're not demonizing each other. But I think it's possible to make that, let's say, difficult. It's not impossible. I certainly don't feel it's impossible. And I will say that I am engaging with those people, and I am setting rules. And when I say I'm setting rules, I mean, I set the rules that if you want to just talk about your dream last night, we can do that. And I don't have to say anything. It's your dream. You can have it. But if we're going to have a mutual reality that we can work in, that we can do something, because in the final analysis, humans don't do well just by themselves. They need a group of some kind to work with, because that's how we're put together. If we're going to do that, then we have to have words have to have an agreed upon meaning, though they don't have intrinsic meaning. And there has to be some kind of cornerstones for what we accept as reality. For example, gravity. Do you believe in gravity? Let's start there. If you don't believe in gravity, if you think gravity is not a thing, then we have nothing else to talk about, because, it's like you live in a parallel probably, but another universe that I can't deal with, because gravity is a ground, that's a cornerstone for me, So if we can agree on that, what else can we agree on, And then we can use that to construct a mutual reality that we can all live in, And then there's a reality that you can live in by yourself. And you can think whatever you want in that thing. But when you come out to work with the rest of us, there has to be some mutual understanding. I try to set those kind of ground rules and just say, if you can explain to me what you believe in a clear way and answer some questions about, give me some context, help me out, then I'm willing to accept that at least you believe that. But if you just give me some things that don't add up even to you, then what do I do with that? And I have coffee conversations like that with people. You know, when you go to coffee, and I'll just say, okay, whatever you want, but you have to defend your position, and I'll listen. And most of the time, what I find out pretty quickly is they don't have a clue what they believe, let alone what others believe. It's just what I feel. Crystal, you wanted to say something? Are you there? I thought she unmuted.
I can agree with Kevin. I can have those conversations that you're talking about, Lawrence, with people in general. But with family, I'm not going to risk those things because I'm not going to change their minds. So I'm going to do the safe subjects because my bottom line is, and my kids aren't expressing those strong opinions at our family gatherings. We're talking about other things that are common interest. But with friends that I can risk losing, yes, I can have those strong conversations and set some guidelines, but that's different than family.
Yeah, I have what's left of family that's very different than I am. And I just said, you know, look, I think your position is, let's say, unsustainable and unreasonable, but it doesn't seem like you have any idea what you're talking about. So there's no point in us talking about that anymore, not because I gave up on my idea, but because I think you can't explain your idea. And until you can, I can't have a discussion with you. All we can have is an argument because you don't know what you're talking about. You can't, when I say that, I mean, you don't have support for your position. You just have a position and you will retreat to some kind of rhetoric, but you can't support it by data and rational thinking. And maybe for her, that's not a thing. That rational thinking is kind of like some kind of pointy head conspiracy to make her look stupid. We say, okay, well then we just don't have a basis to speak. I still love you, but I can't talk to you about that thing because you can't express to me what you feel in a way that I can understand it. So to me, that's a way. Why have a discussion really if you can't really talk about your position and explain it? Does that make any sense to you guys?
Yeah, can I just say, Lawrence, that we used to argue about whether trickle-down economics was good for America. That's the kind of stuff we argued about. Now we argue about whether the 2020 election was stolen because, Cesar Chavez, who's dead, the other Chavez. Because there's theory about the machines being manipulated from other countries, from Venezuela, and it's kind of like what you said. It goes back to, do you believe in gravity? If you believe that the 2020 election was stolen through this bizarre interconnected conspiracy theory, essentially you don't believe in gravity. So how do we have a conversation? With a good person I've known forever, conservative, thinks all progressives are communists and all journalists are communists. How do I have a conversation? I don't. I can't. Yeah. So I quit.
Yeah.
I say hi. Have a good day.
Right. Yeah. But I think we should still engage with people who are not completely off the deep end because we keep losing those people.
Yeah.
We keep losing the marginal people because those other people are repeating over and over and the same kind of thing. And they are receiving no public pushback. Right? And if they're receiving no public, in other words, there's no let's say contest between the ideas, because one set of ideas went into the corner and gave up. They threw in the towel from the person who's just sitting by and haven't made up their mind. The other people seem very confident, and the people who are trying to make sense of a complex situation, they seem less confident, and so they go with the people who can articulate a message, even if it's just repeating rhetoric, because that's all they have. They don't have another side to it because the people with the other side are not speaking. So that's our dilemma. So let's talk about, I will remind you too that there are comments in the chat that people are putting in who may prefer not to speak, but they can add their ideas in the chat. And I will encourage other people as well to do that. Maybe you don't feel like you can just sort of expound as eloquently as Betty did, but you can, if you can put it into the chat, that would be useful. I would like to turn to solutions. We're about a little past our halfway mark. And we have outlined some of how we feel. I'm just wondering, are there things that maybe we could be doing that's not on the, the front line that we don't see? What can we do? What are you doing to, let's say, make the world better, at least for you? How are you coping, Todd?
I'm kind of up in Betty's world, in which, for me, a lot of it has been trying to write more so I can kind of figure out. You said a key thing here, and I think this is really important for everyone. And people have kind of given up on, I'm not giving up on it, but you're not as aware of it. And when things are just coming at you Mach speed, is like, who are we? And then you say, who are we? You start with, who am I? And when you do that, a lot of times, for me, it's been writing. Coming to it finally, I had done a lot of writing, like real writing, over the past decade or so, and kind of being involved with that. When I start from that base, what it allows me is to be a little less certain about myself, but at the same time, kind of discover a lot more about how I feel about things or what I think about things. And so when people come on the attack, I don't feel decentralized by that. I feel like, well, you have an opinion on that. I'm not sharing that opinion, but I'm used now to myself. If I question myself enough, other people can question me, and I don't feel at all attacked, because it's like, yeah, whatever. You're not the only one. You're gonna have to get in line behind me, and I feel a little better, in that creative space. So that's a personal thing that I do. So I feel more comfortable in that uncomfortable space, because there's a lot of uncomfortable space out there. And, I just go back to that there's a line in this Netflix movie about the Chicago 7 where, Abby Hoffman says, you have to excuse me. The guy questions him, and he goes, it took you a little long to answer that. And he says, well, I'm sorry, I haven't been on trial for my thoughts before. There's a lot of feeling like that when people are, so like Kevin says, if you say you're a communist, like, wow, I haven't thought of myself as a communist, but you feel like, okay, that can be a view out there. It's like, I haven't thought of this before. So, when those come at you, one of the only ways you can find comfort in that space is to kind of open yourself up to a little. And it's hard, because it's not a kind space necessarily. But if you take a more thoughtful sense, this is what I found. I have questioned myself harder than I normally have. Figure out kind of who I am. It allows me to deal with other people who might question me more absurdly, but maybe meaner. It allows me to try to move into that space, or at least allows me to have that discussion sometimes. Because if I don't get defensive it disarms it a little. It certainly doesn't disarm it completely, because they're coming. Like you said, they have pretty much a note that they're hitting, and there isn't a lot of other skills there sometimes. But it does slow it down, and it maybe doesn't hit it head on, but at least the discussion can move something that isn't, just who can yell the loudest. And so, that's what I've done, is just try to, be in touch with myself a little more so I can be among others who have a little stronger opinions than I'm used to.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I found that's useful in that arena, especially when we're listening, because I think that's an important part of a conversation, is to ask people to define terms. Just say, when you say that, what do you mean by that? If you say a person is a communist, what do you actually mean by a communist? Are you using a dictionary definition? Did you have your own personal definition? And if you have your personal definition, how would others know exactly what that is? So if we don't know exactly what your definition of your words are, how do we know what you're saying? How do you know what you're saying? If we don't, and sometimes I think we skip the fundamentals and just go right to the middle of the discussion, and that's where we get lost. Jennifer, you had your hand up. Did you have something to say?
Well, I guess I feel like as far as solutions go, I think you have to determine, like you were saying, having boundaries or common language. But if you want to have a conversation with someone that disagrees with you, you have to know if they are willing to hear your side or your opinions. And if they're not at all, they just want to ascribe to the fact that all Democrats are communists, end of story. You can't have that discussion. And it has to go both ways. You have to be able to say, I'll listen to how you feel and believe if you listen to me and show me that same respect. But I think what's missing is a willingness on both sides to have that, listen to someone else, even with you're probably not going to change my mind, but I want to understand how you think. But that seems to be lacking. I know there's an organization that does some work around this. It's called Braver Angels. And I think they've got a South Dakota chapter, but it's, for people that are willing to explore political debate safely with others from the opposite side of the spectrum, that just in the name of understanding others, not trying to change others' opinions.
Very important points that you make, Jennifer. I would add that one of the things I like to do is to ask people, what do you think the point of this discussion is? Why are we having this discussion? Why would you say we're having a discussion about this thing? And then just wait. Because often they don't know, why are we discussing this? Because if you've already decided there's nothing I can learn from you, you just need to listen to me, then you can assume that I'm going to reflect that, just for sake of discussion. I may not, I may just say, oh, I wonder what this guy's thinking. But if you decided that, there's nothing I can learn and there's no reason to have this conversation, then we should not have that conversation, because we're wasting each other's time, But because I think you have to feel something for the other person, some people will say, well, I would like to save your soul. And they think that a certain political position supports going to heaven. Okay, tell me how that works. Tell me a little bit how that works. How do you put that into perspective? You have a religious book of some kind. Tell me how something in your religious book supports that idea. And has that worked out? How is that working out for you? Is it working out for other people? I think learning to find those kind of questions, at least that's what I use in the lab. That's what I use in the lab, whether it's with microorganisms or multicellular organisms. It's like, well, what is it that we're trying to do? What is our objective? Why are we doing it? That seems to be useful. Anyone else about, who can share something with us about how you are, what kind of contributions are you making to your own life to improve it, given what you see the circumstances are, however you see that? Miss Betty?
I have pulled back from the mayhem to a large extent, which has helped me because it's given me more quiet, or, the kind of noises that I subject myself to willingly are noises that I find peaceful or whatever. And I realize that the point of the discussion today has to do with how do we maneuver in this atmosphere with other people. I think that's part of what I've changed. I don't have much interest in trying to change people's minds by dialogue. I've decided to try to live my piece somewhat visibly. Facebook is probably my most visible means and do things that are sort of public, such as being involved in League of Women Voters. And for me, that's been working pretty well, just to try to be what I want to be as best as I can. And then I'll talk about, my friends, people whom I know well, or am getting to know well. We can sit just two people together or in a small group and have some really fabulous conversations. But it's when they are, or we are inquiring of each other, why, when, what, how, about each other's feelings and sources and life experiences. So it's helping me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Betty. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else has some approach to finding some balance or coping with these new situations? Not just the political, we've spent some time talking about that, but there are other things that kind of throw us for a loop too, that are nothing to do with politics.
I think, like, just for me in my personal life and what I try to teach my kids too, even though they're pretty grown now, but it's like, I will listen to you and I will hear you. And I hope that you'll listen and hear me, but I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to fight with you. I don't have the time or the energy for that. And I have changed some of my opinions based off of what other people have said to me or explained to me. But they didn't yell it at me. They didn't grill it into me. They didn't treat me like I was an idiot because I had a separate opinion. And so that's what in my life I'm not willing to do. And that's what I'm trying to teach my kids, like, listen to what other people say, form your opinion, share your opinion, but don't fight with people about it. Like, I feel like everywhere we go and everything I do in this life, it's always a fight. There's always a battle going on. This person versus this person, left versus right, red versus blue. Like, stop fighting. Like, let's just get back to talking to each other. And so for me personally, that's what I just have to, if a fight is going to start or an argument's going to start, I just, okay, I heard what you said. I hope you heard what I said. And, let's talk about what else, something else that we're not going to fight about. I'm not saying I'm never going to talk to you again. I'm not saying I don't want to be your friend or anything, but let's just talk about something else, because I don't want to fight. And I think that that's a big problem, is people jump into the fighting, and instead of listening, what my parents told me when I was little is that I had 2 ears and 1 mouth. I mean, if we could get back to them very basic things, 2 ears, 1 mouth, and just be nice. Just be nice to people. But I don't know how to get us back to those basic things. But for me personally, then that's just what I try to do, is keep myself back to those basic, just trying to be nice, I like an example is, like, I don't know Betty personally. I think she has a lot of great things to say from what I do know of her. I think she's an amazing woman. And if she says something I don't like, why would I automatically forget what I do know about her just because she doesn't like, I don't like this one thing, and now I think she's this evil person that I want to fight with. And that's where I think a lot of our problem is. So I don't know how to fix it, but for me, I just refuse to fight with people.
I think you hit on something that's very important, Carolyn, and that is that it's very easy for our autonomic nervous system to shut down our prefrontal cortex. And I know that sounds like very pointy-headed, but I will say that, when you get emotional about something that's basically a fundamental discussion, when you feel under threat, that part of the brain goes, the amygdala and all of that fight, flight, stress, that goes into action, whether even if we don't know why, but it just, or that is, most people don't know that is what's happening. They say, well, you're getting mad. The person's getting mad is because their brain has interpreted something you said or moved or way you moved as a threat. And they don't even understand that that's the thing that has triggered them. And it has shut down their ability to have a logical thought by putting certain chemicals into the prefrontal cortex. They don't know that's happening. They think it's like, oh, that person is unreasonable. They're just getting mad. They don't know that people retreat to that because it's a comfort space for them, because now they're under threat. They're ready to fight or flight. And that's what their body knows to do. That's what their mind knows to do at that moment, right? So they will start raising their voices and striking certain even physical poses, interrupting the conversation, all those kind of things that make it feel like a fight, because they are in fight or flight mode, but they don't know how they got there. They think it's some kind of way that they, we'll talk to them like rationally, like, well, think back. They can't think back. The brain is not doing thinking now. It's doing fight or flight. So it gets back to something Betty was talking about earlier, at least that's what I interpreted her to say, make people feel good. If you make people feel good, they can hear you. If they feel under threat, they don't hear you. They just feel under threat. Kevin, you were going to say something.
Well, I think I agree that, boy, it'd be nice if we could all just avoid that division and all that fight. And I think, in the recent family union, I tried to do that. But I also think, what if somebody says something to you that's overtly racist? Mm-hmm. Do you just sit there and say, well, I'm just going to ignore that because I don't want to fight? I think you have to call certain things out. If somebody talks to you about assassinating the president, I don't care if it's Trump or Biden or who it is, you have to say, no, you can't talk like that. That's not who we are. And I think if you say something racist or in that degree of hatefulness that has done so much damage and does so much damage, if I lose a friend, I lose a friend. If I lose a family member relationship, I lose a family member relationship, right? I mean, at some point you have to call.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, Kevin. I like when I say I refuse to fight with you, I will say something. I'll tell you how I feel about what you just said or what my thought is, but I'm not going to argue with you for an hour about something. We're not getting anywhere. You know that's what I mean. But I'm after a certain time, this is going nowhere. So let's just take a step back and because it's not going, let's talk about something else and we'll get back to this. But I do agree with you. I'm not going to sit back and let people say things that are mean and vindictive and horrible and stuff either. I'm very opinionated. I'll tell you how I feel. And I'll listen to how you feel. I value how every single person feels, but I just don't want to fight for an hour. I don't want to go back and forth for an hour. We're beating a dead horse, if we're not going to agree with each other, then let's just move on. But that doesn't mean I'm going to hate you because we disagree, I don't. But, a lot of people do hate each other because they disagree with each other. And that is, again, our problem, right? So.
Well, Trish made a comment earlier that maybe we need some kind of workshop on that. And I'm going to think about that. Maybe we'll talk to Humanities Council about doing something like that, because it seems like, yeah, that is a thing. That could be a thing. And we can even do something as a practice. In other words, it's one thing for someone to just sort of make some kind of talking head pronouncements about what happened, but I think we can do something experiential where people can feel their amygdala taking over their brain. And once you start to realize there's a certain emotional epilepsy that happens with us, we can like say, okay, put that rag in my mouth because I'm going to be an epileptic now and I'm going to roll on the floor for a while. But after I finish that, my brain will cool down and I'll be okay, you know, in an emotional sense, you know. Jennifer, you were going to say something.
Oh, I guess something that I've started doing is, you know, this is getting back to the political, but, you know, it's hard to be a Democrat in South Dakota. And I feel like people, you know, living and working in a rural community, people may assume that you believe the same as they do. And what I've started doing is just not, I have a little thing on my wallet. So if I'm in a store, it says South Dakota Democrats. And I feel like I'm not trying to shove it down anyone's throat, but I'm letting people know that, yes, I am a good person and I go to church and I support my community and I have, you know, I parent my children and I believe differently than you, but you don't suddenly dislike me because you now know that I'm politically an anomaly in the community. But I'm not trying to pick a fight with anyone, but if anyone wants to have a conversation with me, I feel like I'm being willing, showing people in a kind way, in a subtle way that, you know, I'm different from you in some ways, but in the person that you know is still the same person.
Yeah, I found that one of the
not hiding the fact that I'm different.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I found is very useful in having discussions, especially if you know that you're going in a situation where you may have such a discussion, or even just like if you have your phone, you have a dictionary on the phone, and then go on the phone, and when they say liberal, type in the word liberal in the dictionary and hand it to them, say, read that for me. And then which one of those things about a liberal are you against? You say you're a Christian, which one of those things you think Jesus is against? Just ask them questions, you know, and it's amazing. What I found is that people haven't thought very deeply about what they're saying. They feel under threat. And I understand, by the way, a lot of times why they feel under threat. You know, humans have a very difficult time with threat assessment as a species. Things that really are threatening to us, we don't even recognize, you know, but things that really have, you know, you take like sharks, you know, people have eaten a lot more sharks than sharks have eaten people, but then we're afraid of the sharks. You know, the sharks should be afraid of us. You know, what's the chances of your getting bitten by a snake? But people have like this innate fear of snakes, you know? So in lots of things that we don't really have a reason to be afraid of, but for some reason we are. And until someone helps us to not be afraid of that thing, we're going to react. And rational thought is not a thing. It's not a thing. It's like trying to convince a kid rationally why every dog is not going to bite them. Especially if they've been bitten once by a dog, they think all the dogs will bite them. You know, or if they've seen someone else getting bitten by a dog, you know, or the dog growls, you know. Lee, you were going to mention something. We're getting
Yeah, I've been driving in heavy traffic. I heard all of you. My gosh, what a thing. All of you people need to be on a panel with others to have this discussion. This needs to be broadcast worldwide. And I like went into the solutions. Hats off to all of you. And I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I better be there by 11:30. So goodbye and thank you so much.
Right. You mean it isn't broadcast worldwide? You mean we've been throwing out all these things and only just the 12 of us?
If I'm not there, it's because I have to do something. But thank you. Okay.
You bet.
Goodbye.
Thank you. And that, as Lee has pointed out, it's now 11:30. That's the end of our wonderful time together. We will at some point pick this up, and I encourage all of you to be thinking about not just the problems, but always throw in some solutions, and brainstorm some solutions. Ask other people when they give you a problem, just say, what would you personally do to make some contribution to the solution? You don't have to have the solution, but what would you do to contribute to a solution? I think the more of us think that way, the better chance we have of finding a solution, because none of us can do everything, but all of us can do something. We all have something we can contribute to make this a better world. Thanks, and we'll see you next time, same station.